Fellowship of the Broken, Making Sense of 12-Step Recovery by Angelo. Chapter 22. Satsang. A great many people throughout history have had personal experiences that validate in different ways the ideas outlined in the previous chapter. The circumstances that give rise to such awakenings vary greatly and include such happenings as near-death experiences, sudden shocks, extreme despair, induced trances, deep meditative states, intense prayer, self-contemplation, and even the effects of hallucinogenic drugs. We are at liberty to discount all of these reports as fanciful, if we wish, but there is an overwhelming abundance of anecdotal evidence if we choose to look. Some describe the experience of being a spiritual self or soul, while others go beyond this into the state of nothingness or emptiness. Researching the experience of others is one thing, and can lead to a certain level of belief or faith. However, having such an experience oneself is a completely different matter and can be utterly life-changing. It would seem logical that such an experience is inevitable for all of us, even if we have to wait until the moment of death for it to occur. That would be a shame, though, as we have the opportunity to die to our personal ego identity during our lifetime, and hence lead the second phase of our lives on a totally different basis. My own glimpse of emptiness occurred back in 2013 when I was drawn to attend Satsang with Sri Muji after having discovered him on YouTube. Satsang is a Sanskrit word that translates as the company of highest truth, or the company of a guru. Sri Muji is a guru and contemporary teacher of the Advaita Vedanta tradition, which is a sub-school of Hindu philosophy. Advaita is also a Sanskrit word, and this translates as not two or non-duality. I have been fortunate to sit in satsang many times with different teachers, and they all point to the same underlying reality, as did Ramana Maharshi. The simple idea behind non-duality is that the seemingly separate personal self is not apart from the source of all that is, but is an integral part of it, and hence not two, but one. The idea may be simple, but the implications for self-realization are enormous. I had the privilege of attending a 4-day satsang with Muji in London, along with several hundred others. There were 7 sessions during the 4 days, with each one lasting 2 hours or so. This gave the opportunity to participate in over 15 hours of guided contemplation. It's impossible to adequately describe the powerful impact that this relatively short period of focused self-inquiry has had on my life. The conclusion is so profound and difficult to believe that there is some hesitation to put it into writing, particularly as it's just another report of an experience. However, I feel somehow compelled to do so, because the truth is that this process of self-realization is available to every single one of us. There's no grandiosity in seeking enlightenment, but rather a humble acceptance that we are the source of all that is, which in turn is nothing but emptiness. The ego mind does not like this idea at all, but nevertheless this is the inescapable conclusion from posing a series of basic questions to oneself. The simple questions posed by Muji in satsang inquire into the true nature of who we really are. For me, I had already concluded that I am body, mind and spirit. The practice of meditation had also allowed me to witness my own thoughts coming and going, so I was open to the idea that there must be a deeper sense of I that is aware of my thinking. This awareness of thinking, or personal consciousness, is often enmeshed in my daily life and only really becomes apparent during meditation. However, this tangling up of personal consciousness with thinking and feeling is itself perceivable, and hence there must be an even deeper sense of I that is aware of this. Once I was able to become aware of my personal consciousness during Satsang and observe it from a deeper place, then I entered a state that we may call pure consciousness. This place of pure consciousness was not involved in thinking or feeling, but just observed what was happening in the mind with a sense of neutrality. These moments of pure consciousness were momentary to begin with, and my mind kept producing thoughts and feelings that my personal consciousness then paid attention to and followed. I would, however, then sense what was happening and step back into pure consciousness. This state of being consciously aware, but not actively engaged in owning my thinking, was a very serene and pleasant place to be. I would have happily settled for this, but the questions kept being posed. If I was able to be aware of experiencing this state of pure consciousness, then there must be a yet deeper sense of I which is able to perceive pure consciousness. I got stuck at this point for some time because my mind was not able to see a way through. I was struggling to understand how it could be possible to perceive pure consciousness, yet the logic of the question meant that there had to be an answer. Then Muji used a lovely analogy of eyesight that made a lot of sense to me. He simply pointed out that our eyes are unable to see themselves. We can see them in a mirror, of course, but without a reflective surface, eyes cannot see themselves. They see everything else, but are not capable of self-perception. The eyes are the source of sight, but the source cannot see itself. Without eyes there would be no sight, but even with eyes, it's not possible to see the source of sight. Sight just is, and we know it is because we can see. When I applied this analogy to the deeper sense of I that I was trying to experience, then I understood immediately what the problem was. I was trying to use my mind to perceive the source of itself, and hence I was struggling to achieve the impossible. The only solution must be to perceive pure consciousness from a position of non-consciousness. But the conscious mind simply cannot do this. I'd reached the end of my ability to understand. Muji then told a simple story about cooking. He described preparing dal in a pan on the stove in his flat and needing to go out to get some additional ingredients. He worried that he might be delayed whilst away from the flat and that the pan may burn dry and catch fire. In order to have peace of mind, he needed to turn off the heat under the pan and allow it to stop bubbling. It was such a simple story, yet deeply profound. His analogy was that the pan on the stove is our mind, and that the only way to stop it bubbling is to turn off the source of heat or power. As soon as I understood the analogy, I visualized my brain with a power cord attached to it, and in my mind I reached out and cut the cord. I didn't hesitate or think about it, I just did it. what happened next has changed my life forever. The moment the cord was cut, my body and mind disappeared in an instant. I was left in a vast, empty nothingness, and a spaciousness and timelessness that had no boundaries. There was nothing to be aware of, no experience, no sensation, no emotion, no thought, and no perception of anything at all. There was nothing. No thing. There was not even a conscious awareness of being anything. Darkness was everywhere, and yet there was a hazy mist of something intangible. The spaciousness seemed to contain everything, and yet it was itself nothing. There is a vague recollection of sensing my body and mind far away in the distance, as if it were on the surface of something nebulous. And the consciousness seemed to be there too, as did many other things. The body and mind seemed empty, and there were notions of insignificance and absurdity that any self-importance could be perceived. Everything out there seemed to be transient, whereas here was stable and timeless. This was the real I, from which everything emanates and is perceived. And this is what happened, as best as I can describe it. I didn't imagine it, because the mind was not present with which to imagine anything. It really did happen. This is my truth. This moment of self-realization lasted a split second, or perhaps a few seconds, or maybe a minute or two. I cannot be sure how long it lasted, but very quickly my mind tried to grab hold of it and perceive it, and in that instant it was gone. It was gone because just as the eyes cannot see themselves, so the source of existence cannot perceive itself. It just is. And I am that. This is the source of existence that the mind cannot possibly perceive or comprehend. This is the underlying truth, the absolute, the great reality, the universal emptiness that is the source of all consciousness and physical matter. It is pure awareness. Mooji describes this state of I am using the metaphor of a lotus flower with fragrances of unconditional love, peace, silence, joy, wisdom and bliss. There's no need for me to try to add any more words. One taste is all it takes. When I returned home that evening, I prayed, as I had been doing for some time, but this time I prayed not with faith, but with absolute certainty. There is, for me, no doubt whatsoever that my old conceptual identity of body, mind and spirit is at one with the source. I can effectively sacrifice my own identity to the underlying reality. And this would be enlightenment. There would be nothing for me to be or do other than allow the flower of truth to blossom through me, and for my being to be an expression of the fragrances within. The challenge arises in living with this truth, yet dealing with the real world as we imagine it to be. I conceive 4 levels of identification, all of which exist simultaneously, and in truth are all one. Our experience of life will be a direct result of which level we are operating from in any moment. The 4 levels can be labelled as body and mind, personal consciousness or soul, pure non-personal consciousness, and ultimate truth. The ego resides in the body and mind, with a core operating system of self-centered fear. The soul is the personal consciousness, with a core of love. Pure consciousness is unconditional love at a level of non-personal, harmonious, universal identification. And ultimate truth is the source of all existence and consciousness. Now, this is an oversimplification compared to some traditions, but it makes sense to me and helps me quickly see where I'm coming from in any situation. The deeper my state of awareness, the more wonderful and serene my experience of life will be. My mind seems to keep dragging me back into ego and identification with my old self, but today I know the underlying truth of who I really am. My personal ego mind is not the truth. I'm deeply grateful to Mooji for dedicating his life to helping so many others towards self-realization. His teaching gently points to the truth within, and he is a mirror in which we are all able to see our own true selves. His videos on YouTube are well worth watching, and his books are wonderful. I perceive him to be an example of divinity personified, but so too, potentially, is each and every one of us. There are, of course, many gurus and spiritual masters from all faiths and backgrounds. I'm not so much pro-Mooji per se, but instead more in favour of having an experienced teacher to guide us away from ego towards the deeper levels of consciousness. There is a loving energy in Satsang that is impossible to define and seems to aid the process of self-inquiry. Independent self-realization may well be possible, but my own experience has been that it's far more effective to be part of a group or community that supports such an objective. The ultimate truth of existence lies within, and we can each find it if we're willing to look. It doesn't matter which particular faith, tradition, or teacher we relate to. Human beings are each unique, and we are drawn to different experiences depending on our individual temperaments and stages of spiritual development. The important lessons from Satsang are, firstly, the crucial role of a teacher or guide, and secondly, the collective vibrational effect of groups or communities.